What if I told you there was a movie out there directed by Jon Favreau, produced by Ron Howard, which stars James Bond and Indiana Jones? You'd probably think, that's going to be an awesome movie. What could possibly go wrong? Well, that movie could be called Cowboys and Aliens, and it could be about cowboys fighting aliens.
Worst movie ever!
Welcome to Movie Film, or more importantly for today, worst movie ever. I'm Carl, and the contender up today for the worst movie ever is Cowboys and Aliens, if you didn't get that from the little intro thing. So Cowboys and Aliens, it's a movie from 2011, and as I stated already, directed by Jon Favreau, produced by Ron Howard, as well as Roberto Orci and Alex Kurtzman, who also wrote the movie, or part wrote the movie. They worked on a lot of the Star Trek stuff we've seen in recent years, and various other projects too. And on top of that, you've got a cast which was spectacular on the face of it. You got Walton Goggins, you've got Sam Rockwell, Clancy Brown, Olivia Wilde, Daniel Craig, James Bond himself, and Harrison Ford. On paper, that all makes for some good stuff, but then as soon as you say the title, you suddenly realise why this movie is on the worst list for worst movie ever. You don't even have to have seen the movie, and you will know that this movie, it's never going to work. And it should work. It's got everything it needs. It's got a great cast, it's got a great team behind it. It's perhaps got two main writers. This film has 7 writers listed on IMDb, but Roberto Orci isn't listed, even though he is also titled as screenplay writer or screenwriter. So this film effectively had 8 writers, and on top of that, it's based on a graphic novel, so the original story is written by someone else, so therefore you've got 9 writers coming up with one story. The proverbial old thing of too many chefs spoil the broth, that's definitely happened here. One thing a lot of people complain about in regards to movies is that Hollywood just makes reboots and remakes or superhero movies now. There's nothing original. And Cowboys and Aliens was at least an attempt at something original. They should get some points for that. But Cowboys and Aliens, it's just such a stupid concept. Now, it might work in a graphic novel, but in a live action movie, it was always going to be a stretch. And I think that's the thing, because this movie looks spectacular. It's got great cast who all put in good performances. The CGI is pretty good too. It's just the whole core main idea is just so ridiculous. It was never going to work. And you've even got, as I've stated many times now, an unbelievable team behind this movie. Like, if they announced today that there was a movie directed by Jon Favreau, produced by Ron Howard and the guys who made Star Trek, and you've got James Bond and Indiana Jones in it, we'd all be flocking to cinema to see it. If cinemas were open, or if we could go to a movie theatre, that would be great. But you know, we can't do that at the moment, but if we could, the point stands, I think we'd all flock to that movie. And of course, here on Worst Movie Ever, we're on the hunt for the worst movie ever, the current worst movie ever, standing as Star Wars The Last Jedi. We're currently looking for a movie worse than Star Wars The Last Jedi, and the way we find that out is by taking a look at the entire story. So let's run down the entire story as quickly as we can. The story starts out in the Wild Wild West. Not that Wild Wild West, thankfully, because that should also be on this list for worst movie ever, maybe someday. We begin with Daniel Craig shooting up a wake in the desert, and he's got a weird bracelet thing on his arm. I don't know why I'm pointing to it, everyone knows what an arm is. So some guys come along and Daniel Craig basically beats them up. He heads into the nearest town called Absolution, and we've instantly started with this Wild West, Red Dead Redemption style town setting, just a good old-fashioned Western. And that's the thing with this movie. The cowboy stuff is fantastic, and the alien stuff is completely unnecessary. So they basically establish like who the main people are in the town, like Sam Rockwell, the bartender, and there's Paul Dano, who is Harrison Ford's kid, who's kind of an asshole because his dad is like the big guy amongst town and no one's going to mess with his kid. So they've established everybody, and later on we see some guys who work for Harrison Ford. They are like tending to cattle, but they're getting drunk. And one guy goes to like take a piss or something, and when he's doing that, bright lights appear, there's sounds of explosions, he falls in the river. When he gets out of the river, everything's on fire, all the cattle are gone and all his friends are gone. Much later on, Harrison Ford has the guy tied up amongst 2 horses, and he's trying to find out what happened, thinking the guy just screwed him over basically. But his son's been arrested. That forces Harrison Ford to go into town to get his son back from the prison, and he also shoots into town because he finds out that Daniel Craig's character's in there. I believe his name is Jake Lonergan. So we end up with all the main people in town. And when they're in town, they're arguing, there's back and forth. Harrison Ford's trying to get his kid and Jake Lonergan out because he wants him as a prisoner, I guess. And then they see lights in the sky, and the lights disappear, they flash back on, and it's UFOs over the town which are destroying the town. When there's so much chaos and, you know, buildings being blown up and fire everywhere. Daniel Craig somehow finds out how to use the bracelet thing he's got, and he shoots the door open, and then he gets out and ultimately shoots down the ship. And when everything's blowing up and everything's on fire and Daniel Craig's blowing up stuff with his new bracelet toy, people are getting captured, War of the World style. You don't see the aliens at this point, you just see the ships, and people are being taken. These like lassos come down and take them on these ships. So half the town is basically taken. As they investigate the UFO that's crashed, they hear a noise in a house. It's an alien in the house. He's chased away ultimately, but he leaves footprints, and they know that they have to team up. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. They have to team up and go after the guys, the alien guys, to get their people back. Along the way, they're held up by other people, and it turns out it's Daniel Craig's old gang. By the way, Daniel Craig can't remember anything. He's got amnesia. So they established that Daniel Craig had this old gang and he abandoned them to be with his wife, and they're pissed off about that. Because, I don't know. But that's the setup for later. So again, they set off after the aliens. They find this overturned boat in the middle of land. It's nowhere near a river. They go in there and decide to settle down for the night. And when they're in that ship for the first time, this is when we see one of the aliens, because one of the aliens appears in the ship, and ultimately Clancy Brown's character is killed. But they have to keep going. They have to go try to get more of their people back. Daniel Craig still can't remember anything. Olivia Wilde's with them too for some reason. So the story rattles on, and ultimately we end up with a point where Olivia Wilde is captured by one of these ships, and Daniel Craig gets on his horse and chases after it, rides up a cliff and jumps on top of the UFO, and then uses his bracelet thing to shoot the UFO while they're on it, gets Olivia Wilde free. They fall into a river, but then an alien pops out of the ship and he attacks Olivia Wilde. Daniel Craig kills him, but Olivia Wilde is clearly injured. So he's carrying her through the desert and he's just trying to get back to people to try save her. They're talking all the while, and they come across their old friends, Sam Rockwell, Harrison Ford, they're all there. And they determine that Olivia Wilde is now dead. Daniel Craig's not happy about it, but then some Indians appear and they capture them. They bring them back to their base. They take Olivia Wilde's dead body and just throw it on a fire, as you do. So they're all arguing amongst themselves. Looks like Harrison Ford and co, they're all in trouble. They're going to be killed by these Indians, it seems. But magic happens, and sparks come from the fire, and we get some fancy effects, and ultimately Olivia Wilde comes back from the dead in the fire, and then she reveals that she's actually an alien, but a different type of alien. She's from a different planet, though we never see her like alien form. Long and short of it is she's from a different planet that got screwed over by these other aliens, so she's on Earth to stop them screwing over Earth. Then the Indians, through magic, cure Daniel Craig's amnesia, and again the Indians team up with them because the enemy of my enemy, all that, they all have to team up against these aliens to get their people back. And then Daniel Craig goes off, gets his old gang, and they team up. So then they've got all the team they need. They find the alien base. Daniel Craig remembers because Daniel Craig was previously captured and escaped. That's how he got the bracelet thing and had amnesia. So Daniel Craig can remember how to get back into the base and all this stuff. We see the base, it's not that impressive for a sci-fi movie. The alien creatures also isn't that impressive for a sci-fi movie, but ultimately we end up with the final battle where they're going to try to blow up the base and get all their people back. With about half an hour to go, that's the plan. Daniel Craig and Olivia Wilde, they go into the base while everyone else is outside having the battle. And very easily, Olivia Wilde and Daniel Craig just end up in the room with all the prisoners, all the human prisoners, and they're looking at this light thing. Olivia Wilde says, don't look at the light thing, so of course Daniel Craig does look at the light thing, and then she has to snap him out of it by shooting the thing. It was funny, I guess. But they snap everyone out of it. Olivia Wilde is trying to free everybody and the aliens are coming, so Daniel Craig has to stand off with the aliens and shoot as many as he can while she frees everybody. Ultimately, she gets everyone free and they all escape without too much effort. They all just walk out, and Daniel Craig then chases after Olivia Wilde, who's going to a different part of the ship, and he's saying, hey, the exit's over here, but she's going the opposite way. Then they end up in the central command place, I guess, and there's no aliens around. It's just Daniel Craig and Olivia Wilde. She tells them how to release the bracelet thing and she needs it to blow up the ship. So he's like, okay, here's the bracelet. Not questioning like, why wouldn't I just keep it till we get to the core and then I'll blow it up? She's like, no, give it to me, and he doesn't question it at all. So she climbs into the thing, says goodbye to him, he's confused, ends up back in the ship. When he's there, he gets attacked by an alien who he previously attacked before, who remembers him. And then Harrison Ford comes along and saves the day out of nowhere. He like saves Daniel Craig from being killed from this alien. Then Daniel Craig and Harrison Ford escape the ship together. Olivia Wilde climbs up to the car with an alien chasing her, but who never actually gets to her, and she just blows up the car, and everyone's outside and they all cheer because the aliens are dead. As the ship's like trying to escape, it blows up and everybody's happy. Now they've established as well at some point that this ship is a scout ship, that there's more aliens out there, and this is just the one that's gonna like send a message to say, hey, come to Earth and we're gonna take over. But the good guys win. They head back to their town. Harrison Ford, Daniel Craig have their like final little reconciliation, and then Daniel Craig rides out of town, not quite into the sunset, but he just rides out of town as we fade to black. But like they clearly just discovered alien life, and you know, they've been told there's more aliens out there and there's more coming, but they're like, everything's fine now, we're gonna build a railroad.